everybody. Welcome to the Healing ALS Sunday Community Meeting. Okay, this is week 13 out of a 26-week course on how pals have healed from ALS. All right, we do meet 12 p.m. on Sundays, Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time, and 9 p.m. European time. The recordings here are to help us support each other with pals, involving pals who have reversed their ALS, giving information with pals who are going through their ALS and having challenges as they try to stop the progression of this disease and try to reverse it and turn it around. This is for educational purposes only. We are not medical professionals, and we're not here giving you medical advice. It's just an online support group and how pals have reversed their ALS holistically. But those can join in who are medical professionals, family members, caregivers, everyone can come on in so we can all be a part of these ALS reversals. We have personally met over 30 ALS reversal pals. It's probably closer to 40 by now, at least, that we have visited. And we want to expect at least 100 reversals out of this group. So far, things are happening and people are gaining functionality, not losing functionality, okay? Few reminders, okay? Make sure you go to healingals.org, click on PAL Support Webinars, and that will actually get you to these past recordings. And you put on webinar, click on webinars, but you have to sign in as a member first. And once you sign in as a member, which is free, you just click on PAL Support Webinars and you can get all of the past webinars that we've had so you can catch up, okay? Also, make sure that your mindset is great because you need to be positive. You need to make sure that all this healing process, no matter what you do physically, make sure you do the same equivalent mentally, because having the proper mindset to heal makes a big difference, and your nutrients actually absorb better in your cells, okay? Use your holistic professionals and doctors, etc., as advisors. You're the president, they're just giving you advice. Feel what resonates with you, because some of the advice you're getting may not be advice that works for you. It might work for somebody else, but it may not necessarily work for you. This is a very multifactorial disease, and it actually has to, everyone heals personally, and they use their own journey to heal, okay? This is a marathon. It is not a sprint, but some pals have turned it around relatively quickly. Make sure that you're having fun as you go through this, and make sure that you stay positive. It's very important. All your questions, please put in the chat. There are a lot of questions that can be answered. And Tish, we need you to let us know about the boot camp coming up and all these new activities that we have for other pals that are fresh and joining so they can catch up. Go right ahead, Tish.
Okay, great. So some people are just wondering, what else is going on here. So we are doing a lot of things in the background. The volunteers have been amazing, and we're really getting a lot going. The Sunday meeting is What You're Healing Now. And actually, I need to add another column here called the website. We are redoing the website into a really nice ALS knowledge base. So that's going to go right in column 2 there. Column 3 is a boot camp. We intend to start that in October. And I just wanted to let you all know that's going to be 4 weeks in addition to Sundays, and just give you the very, very basics of nutrition, detox, how to find a medical professional, and how to get your mind in the state of healing. Because as you'll notice with Evie today, the mind is extremely powerful. As soon as everyone's finished the boot camp, you will be entitled to join the Healing ALS WhatsApp group, which we're now piloting. We're also piloting a mastermind group. They've just met 3 times. So that's going on. We also have an ALS clinician think tank, which just had its 3rd meeting, I think. So these are functional medical practitioners who are getting together really to just share ideas and say, what are we missing here? how can we help our patients better? And the goal of that is to improve outcomes for all pals, and everything that we learn in the clinician think tank, we will be sharing with you. The ALS reversal study, we are designing it at the moment. We're hoping it will be done, we'll be ready to actually accept patients end of first quarter of 2021. So I just wanted to let you know that there are a lot of things going on here besides just us. And I really want to, and I would like to introduce our speaker today. There's Evie. Evie was diagnosed in 1980 at age 29, and we're so honored to her because 2020 is her anniversary year. It has been 40 years since her diagnosis, and all of you, and she has outlived. Have you outlived your neurologist yet, or is he still around?
Oh, no, he died a long time ago.
Okay. So this is what we find with all of our ALS reversals. Many of them outlive their neurologists. So it's very cool. And Evie, just in case, I want you to mention the little general in case you don't mention it in your talk. This is a little reminder to remember that. Evie was in the middle of a very, very successful career as a hospital administrator in hospital administration. And she was diagnosed with ALS, and she was given 1 year to live. She was extremely fast progressing. I think you ended up getting an infection at the hospital because of the muscle biopsy, and she left after diagnosis like 4 weeks later in a wheelchair. So her progression was very, very fast, and it soon became apparent that she could no longer perform her job. And she decided to analyze this, and I'll let her share that, but she was basically waiting to die. And she, as you can see, she didn't. And I think the other thing that was really cool is that her neurologist later presented at medical conferences together. Evie made a career change and is now a Methodist minister. So that also happens a lot. When you heal from ALS, a lot of people make some major changes in their lives. They think, I kind of was going down a direction that I didn't want to go and maybe wasn't in my soul. And Evie did that after she healed. So, okay, so Evie, go ahead. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It is such a privilege and a joy to be with you. And I honor your bravery, your courageousness just to be here. We all know this is a tough disease, but there are many of us that can tell you there are pathways that can help you have the highest quality of life possible for as long as possible. And so I was 29. I was living in Tucson, Arizona, and I was directing intensive care and coronary care units at a hospital, and I was on the road to meet my goal to be the youngest female hospital administrator in the country. And what happened was I first started noticing that I was having trouble holding on to vials of medicine. And I was stumbling a little bit, nothing major, but a little bit. And this went on for a few months, and I really didn't think that much about it. And then I was on a hike with some other friends, and I fell, and they thought that I'd broken my wrist. And falling, I didn't fall over anything. I didn't trip. I didn't stumble. I just fell. And that started my journey. I was first diagnosed by Dr. Harry Buxbaum in Tucson, Arizona, who sent me to Baylor Medical Center for a second diagnosis that was done by Dr. Patton. And so the second diagnosis happened on September 20th, 1 week from today in 1980. And I was told that I had probably less than a year to live. I had gotten a staph septicemia from their muscle biopsy, and that seemed to put me on this rapid downhill trajectory. But the way I was told is very interesting, because Dr. Patton came barely into the room with his white lab coat on and the stethoscope around his neck and his arms crossed, and he leaned against the door jamb and he said, "You're a nurse. You know what's going on. Go home, make out your will, and will us your body so that when you die, we can come and get some cells, so at least you will have been of some help to humanity." That was how I was told. And that was all that I was told too. And so as I went home, I knew better than this. I mean, in my mind, I knew better than this. But I bought into what he said. And so I went back to die. I stopped my, of course, I had to stop nursing. I had to stop leadership. Oh, and the other thing that happened, the day that I was told by Dr. Patton that I was going to die within a year, the hospital administrator called and said, "Well, if you can't return to work in 2 weeks, we're going to have to terminate your position." And later that night, I had finished my master's program, but a friend who was in graduate school was living with me, and she called to ask if I had homeowners insurance, because while she was at class that day, a moving truck had pulled up and unloaded everything that was in the house. And so within 24 hours, I was told I was going to lose my life. I'd lost my job, and I'd lost 90% of my possessions. And so that kind of stripped me down to nothing. And so when I went back, being a overachiever, I decided that if I was going to die, I was going to make the best death possible. And so I was talking to people about dying. I was talking to classes about dying. There was supposed to be a CBS crew to come in and film my dying so they could have a documentary on somebody in the dying process and go from where I was to my actual death. And it just all sounds kind of weird right now, but that was where I was. And I go back to the other slide for just a moment. But I did observe my body. I felt like from a detached observer. I was watching it go downhill every day. I was tracking what was getting weaker. I was kind of marking it in my mind and checking it out, if not once a day, several times a day. And I had already been part of the Holistic Nurses Association and the Holistic Medical Association, and I knew that there was a mind-body connection, but I was not really applying it to myself yet. Okay, now next slide. So one of the things that I did was I decided to isolate myself. For a while, I had every person with their treatment coming in, meaning somebody was trying to tell me why I was ill, you know, it was because I was holding on to this or holding on to that. And there were people that used crystals and chakra aligning. And I'm not saying any of that is bad, but there was at one point, that I just said enough. And so I isolated myself from my family. I told them that I did not want to see them. I was living in the home of a couple who had wanted to be my caregivers and to help out. He was a Methodist minister, and they had lived in Findhorn, Scotland for a few years, and they felt that they could either be my saviors or help me transition. Well, they were neither. My attitudes toward myself was that I was happy internally, if I wanted to be truthful, that I was going to die, because I was going to get out of a life that I didn't really want to be part of. And so I wasn't necessarily trying very hard to change things. And part of that happened when I was told by someone in authority, Dr. Patton, that I had no hope. And if you're told you have no hope, where do you get that hope from? And so, next slide. So one of the things that happened, I had shut the door on everybody. I wasn't seeing friends. I was in a wheelchair. I needed help with all my activities of daily living. I was having trouble swallowing. They wanted to put me on a respirator at night, and I said no to that. And two amazing friends, Larry and Jim, broke in one day. They broke into my room, and I was so mad at them. And they picked me up, and they put me in the car as I'm yelling at them all the way. And they took me out to Gates Pass on the west side of Tucson, one of the most beautiful places for sunsets. And they had a picnic sunset, wine and cheese and other delectable goodies, and, you know, the ground cloth, and they sat me there, and they just said, we wanted you to see something beautiful. Something happened inside of me because of them. I think it was ready to happen. It needed a catalyst, and they were the catalyst. From that point on, I began a different journey. My worldview changed. I didn't want to have the best death possible. New questions began to emerge, and I thought, well, if I'm going to die, and there was that word if, not when, that was, little word was a big change. If I'm going to die, who did I want to be when I died? Asking that one question just opened up an ocean for me of a different way to be in the world. It put me on a path. It put me on a path that I'll talk about that ended up, we're going to start at the ending, ended up with 8 radical shifts in my worldview. Do you have that slide next?
You're muted, Tish. We can't hear you.
I just wanted to let everyone know that that Evie's reversal has been confirmed by Dr. Bedlack, so she is one of his 48 reversals.
Thanks.
And
Thanks
that was just another little piece I wanted to share with everyone. I
may not be, but there are people that think I'm the first documented reversal of ALS. So there were 8 radical shifts in my worldview. The first one was, I had been living life for rewards and recognition. I did things because I would get accolades out of it. I would win something. I would be seen as better than somebody else. I went from that to living life to where I was thinking more of others than myself. And this just didn't happen overnight. I had to ask myself, what are the things in my life that need to change? This was one of the things that needed to change. I needed to not be so self-centered, even in the physical condition I was in. So I developed questions to ask myself, and I asked them at the end of most days. And these questions were appropriate to me, who I was at that time. Each one of us would have different questions to ask. I would have different questions to ask today. But just quickly, how many times did I say thank you today? Thank you was not a big phrase in my vocabulary. Did I ask someone a question about themselves or their life? Did I call someone just to say hi or let them know I care? On a scale of 1 to 10, how loving would I rate myself? Again, did I say thank you? Did I always speak up first? Meaning, did I ever listen to anybody, or was it always about me? What was my attitude like that day? Did I honestly share my feelings? Did I work on my body image? And did I take time to think about who I was still angry at and needed to forgive? These were all different aspects of me that I knew I needed to work on in order to become the person that I so longed to be before I died. So I set out to kind of transform the way I interacted with the world. Next slide, please. I began a journey of letting go of resentments, and I found forgiveness. And this included, and maybe most importantly, forgiveness for myself. Not because I had done anything really horrible, but just because I had held on to these resentments so long. Mrs. Goranson was my third grade teacher, and she had wanted me kicked out of the public school system. I had had polio as a baby, and some people say that if you've had polio, you can't get ALS. Well, that's not true. ALS is a different neurological disease. All it meant was the neurological system of my body was my weakest link. And I was in a leg brace. And in those days, if you were physically disabled, you were also considered to be mentally challenged. And she told the other kids not to play with me and that they would get what I had. And so one of the things that I recognized when I was about 30 was that my entire life had been spent trying to, since the third grade, trying to prove Mrs. Goranson wrong. Who was still running my life? Mrs. Goranson. I had held on to those words and things that she said long after she was not in this world. And she was still pulling the strings. And I so wanted to prove her wrong. And there were others that were the same thing, that had tried to limit me or say I couldn't be all that I felt I was created to be. And sometimes I was looking for revenge, a way to get back at them. But the first question I asked myself after I had made a list with Meg writing down my names for me, I asked, did my anger hurt or affect them at all? And there wasn't one person who even knew how much anger I held or how hurt I had been. So I had to work on a process of forgiveness longer than could be talked about here. But visualization was a big part of it for me because I have an active artistic mind. I could visualize that person in a room. I could visualize them sitting in the chair next to me, and I would talk to them about what I thought they had done. But I also forgave them in my visualization. And I didn't do this just once. Forgiveness is an ongoing journey. At least that's the way I've experienced it. It can happen in big chunks, but to really forgive and feel whole and feel like that incident or that person has no claim on you takes time. And so then my third shift was I went from hating my body to experiencing its beauty. Now, this wasn't just, oh, I dislike it. This was part of the reason I wanted out of life. I hated my physical body. I felt I was God's joke to everyone. Because of polio, I had one leg that was a lot smaller than the other. I came in 2 sizes. My body had never been right, but I pretended to accept it. I was always smiling and laughing, but I detested it. And one of the ways that was shown was that in high school, I was anorexic, and nobody knew it. Nobody caught it. I'm 5 feet tall, and I weigh about 117 pounds now. When I graduated from high school, I weighed 40 pounds less than that. So I was really, really skinny, and I still thought that I was fat. I sent myself mixed messages for years. And I realized that as a minister and a person of faith, that there was no way I could love my neighbor as myself. There was no way I could accept love or give love, really, because of how I felt about me and my physical body. And so I began some mirror work. I called it being nakedly honest with myself, literally. I sat in front of a mirror. I had Meg help me in my wheelchair. with nothing on. It didn't last very long when I first started it, maybe a couple of minutes, and then I would burst into tears. But I worked up to doing this for 20 minutes at a time, and then more than once a day. And one day it was like a light switch was turned on, although it was at the end of a lot of hard work. And I knew that I loved myself as I was, and I didn't have to change or be different. And one of the ways I started out with that was I found something about myself that was okay before I could accept the rest of my body. And I had long hair then, and it was wavy and curly, and my hands had always been strong, and they played the piano, and they had helped heal people. And so I loved my hair and I loved my hands. And when I would become overwhelmed with detest for the rest of my body as I tried to look at it, I would go back and focus on my hair or on my hands, and I would say to myself, but they are beautiful. Your hair is beautiful. Your hands are beautiful. And so that was something that was critical to changing how I interacted with the world. Next slide. So through that process, I found myself moving from a desire to escape life to a quest to embrace life exactly like it was. For me, back in 1980, there were not all the options that are there now for you to do to help your body along. They were not there. And so I wanted to live fully in the moment. I wasn't thinking about healing my body. I was thinking about healing my life, healing my soul, my spirit, my mind, my emotions, so that when I did die, I would feel like somebody who loved and could love, and that I would feel like I had become the person that I was supposed to be. I became a nurse because others said I couldn't do it. It wasn't really what I wanted to do, and I was good at it. I was really good at it, but I felt trapped. And I felt I had to achieve my goal. And so that was driving me and driving me and driving me. Instead of, again, from my faith perspective, asking a question like, well, God, what do you want me to do? That never entered my mind. Next slide, please. What happened in this process was I shifted from dying every day to living every day. I didn't count my days. I stopped tracking whether my body was getting weaker or not and what wasn't quite working as well today. From the beginning, I had felt like the way I described it was a bathtub with a slow leak. I could feel energy moving out of my body. And it was slowly draining away. So I believed that diagnosis that I had 1 year to live initially. And Larry and Jim helped me to see that I needed to live every day because no one knows. No one can tell you. No one has a crystal ball. No one has all the answers. No one can give you your death date. And then I had to learn, so part of also what I was doing was learning to identify my feelings, sharing them and letting them go. Because I always had this happy-go-lucky smile, and I was always on top of everything. I was the person that everyone came to talk to or to work through something. And I always acted like nothing bothered me. I was never ruffled. And the way that I did that was I turned off my emotions. Also something you need to do when you work in a major trauma center, which I did, and in intensive care and coronary care. You have to detach from everything that you're dealing with, but you're supposed to go back and kind of process it later. Well, I just never went back. I lived in neutral. And so I did learn that my emotions affected my body when I started this process. It was like, what am I feeling? Well, it would be something in my gut. I would feel some tension or tightness in my gut. And then I learned that that tightness in my gut was actually anger. And so that was a journey, because I was so in touch with what my physical body was doing. I could use it as a barometer to help me understand what was joy, what was anger, what was boredom, what was that normal range of emotions. Next slide, please. And through all of this, I finally became willing to open myself up to love. This shift, how I interacted in the world, was an outcome of the other 6. It wasn't something that I tried to do. It was something that evolved. My heart began to open. It was like my heart was encased in brick walls. And through this process, those bricks started coming down one by one. And as I learned to love myself and accept life and forgive others, I was finally able to believe that someone else could love me. It's not that people didn't try. I just never let it in. Next slide, please. So I no longer expected and prepared for death. I celebrated life and considered every moment to be precious. And this occurred alongside, so this wasn't just done in a vacuum. I mean, I also knew that I needed a healthier body, so I ate a healthy diet. Right at the beginning of all of this, I had my mercury fillings removed. I was something brand new then that people were just beginning to talk about, but I found a dentist in Tucson that was at that cutting edge and was willing to do that. I took amino acid supplements and other vitamins, but that was about all that I could do in the sense of additional therapies, because there truly was nothing else. And like I said, I felt like that bathtub with a slow leak. And one day, something happened. That slow leak stopped. I didn't understand it. All I know is, again, it was something that probably occurred gently over time, but there was a moment in time when I didn't feel energy leaking out of my body. These changes were radical. They took an ongoing commitment. And this extends into the present. My body is my barometer. I know when I'm getting off base. Sometimes I don't listen as quickly as I should. But my process was not my process. This is not your process. This does not need to be your process. My process was not to focus on cure or remission, because there was nothing that showed me that could happen. It was to seek a sense of wholeness, not brokenness. This did not mean that I ignored something that had the potential to alter the negative physical processes occurring in my body. I paid attention to my body, but I was moving after wholeness of spirit and mind. And next slide, please. And most important to me, most important, was to see myself as beautiful instead of a piece of trash. To know that I was worthy of love and affection. My process was one of trial and error. I didn't have a psychologist helping me. I didn't have a minister helping me. It seems like I was given the gift to be able to be both present and that detached observer, to develop exercises for myself, to be disciplined, to do them every day, and to have just enough help around me that I had people that also believed in those things, that Meg in particular, would help me with whatever I said I needed to do. In fact, I'll never forget the day that I got angry. For the first time, I got angry. And I was yelling and screaming, and my right arm was still pretty strong. And I took my cane and I knocked everything off of the dresser, and I broke as much as I could. And Meg came running in and she just said, "Hallelujah, you're angry." She was so excited that I had expressed an honest emotion instead of feeling like, everything was great and sunny. I became ready to embrace life because, you see, for me, dying was not the problem. I was ready to die at the beginning, perhaps even eager to die. It was living that was my problem. I had to develop not only just the will to live, the desire to live, but also the tools that would help me see that no matter what time I had left, life could have meaning and beauty. Next slide, please. Is that all my slides?
Tish, you are muted. You have to unmute yourself in order to talk.
Yep, there are more.
Okay.
So yeah, so I switched from this one to that one. Hold it. Yeah, you still. So you finished with that one,
Yes.
and you finished with this one.
Yes.
Okay.
So what I told you about this already, I felt like a bathtub with a slow leak, and I could feel it starting out. And so we did go over this one already. I had no idea what that meant, but at this point I added in some daily exercises because I thought, well, maybe it has some meaning that I stopped feeling energy flowing out of my body. I used a muscle stimulator. I rode a stationary bike. And I did a fairly elaborate meditation, 20 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day. And like I said, my mind thinks visually. And so I developed this whole construction crew in my body, and they still work today. They got kind of a little bit pot bellies on them. They're men and women. They're different nationalities. They all have blue overalls on, and they wear funny hats, and some of them are laying new bricks, and some of them are laying new wiring, and some of them are digging up trash and things that need to be discarded and throwing them into the system that will discard them. It's very elaborate. You don't have to have something that elaborate. In fact, if you can't visualize, there are other ways to work with your body. But for me, this was the strongest way that I found to help rebuild my body. Next slide. And
you still do that today?
Yes, my construction crew every morning. I talk with it, I send it energy. I ask it what it needs. So I've done this almost nearly every day for 40 years.
Wow. And you said that you got tested at least before the conference. Just before you spoke at the conference, you said your doctor had tested you.
Well, that was an interesting story. I didn't know that I'd ever go back to Dr. Bernard Patton. And I ended up going back to him about, I don't remember now, 4 years after things started turning around. And they had put my file folder, nothing was on computer then, they put my file folder in the dead file because he just assumed that I died. And when they redid the testing, there were a whole bunch of biochemistry things that were different than when I was first in the hospital at Baylor Medical Center. And we had wished then that we had been tracking those because we'd probably seen those changes all along, the biochemical changes that occurred as a result of the mind-body connection. But he let me see a completely different side of himself. And we started working together then. And the first medical conference I spoke at was at an international ALS conference in Varese, Italy, where he and I spoke together. And we spoke about the changes that he saw in me, not just physically, but as a person. Because Tish wanted me to mention this, I was the little general when I directed intensive care and coronary care units. That was my nickname. People's lives were at stake. I was in charge, I was focused, and I probably wasn't very nice. Dr. Patton used another word for me that begins with a B. And then he was talking about how when I came back, I just seemed to have this loving heart, this gentleness. And so he didn't like me from the beginning. I didn't like him from the beginning, and we just clashed. But we ended up actually working together. And Dr. Buxbaum in Tucson, who's still alive today but not practicing medicine, when I went back to him, he was in his office with a group of medical students. And he just picked me up and twirled me around and set me back down and said, you know, men and women, You've got to know that there's just some things in medicine that you cannot explain, and you need to be careful what you tell the patient. So that was the thing with those two doctors. So was it all coincidence? I don't think so. I do think that there were biochemistry, chemical changes in my body with my T cells, with my immune system, with my adrenal system, with a whole bunch of different systems. And there's always that question, why did it occur to me and not others? Some of these questions will have no satisfactory answer. Yet I know that without the journey where I examined and changed and healed my life, I would not be here today. Healing of my mind and spirit led to healing of my physical body. It's been documented so many times that there is a mind-body-spirit connection. But for me, the goal was and continues to be, what do I need to do to have the highest quality of life possible for however long I have to live? So after all of this, many years later, I and a couple of other people were brainstorming, and we wanted to look at the mind-body-spirit connection in healing, but you can't use the S word, the spiritual word, in medical research. So we decided that we would look at psychological status as a confounding factor. And so in 1994, so for the 5 years previous to that, in 1994, we had a study that published in the Archives of Neurology, Survival in Amyotrophic Lateral Sclerosis, the Role of Psychological Factors. I was the lead researcher. Our team followed 144 PALs and their caregivers for a 5-year period to look at the connection between mind, body, spirit, though we didn't use the S word, and longevity. And the conclusion was that adjusting for confounding factors, psychological status is strongly related to outcome in ALS. That study is available online if you want to look at it. It's been used and cited hundreds of times in other research. There were some important, you couldn't demonstrate them by numbers. But one of the things that I heard over and over again, or all our data collectors heard, we did this in, we had people in San Francisco, Seattle, Detroit, and Philadelphia, was that their lives became spiritually and emotionally healthier than they had ever been before when they really started looking at themselves and working with them. Some of them lived many, 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 many years. I do not know if any of them are still alive, but there was significant. One medical researcher at a medical conference I presented at stood up and said to this audience of esteemed scientists from around the world that if I and my team had found a pill that gave these results as strong as they were, and the University of Washington and the University of UCLA, both we asked them to try to tear down our results, and all they did was get stronger. He had said that if we had found a pill or a treatment, every physician would be touting this to everyone. And he said, what we need to learn is, one, not to tell people that they have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 1 year to live, but it's still happening today. And he also said what we need to help people with is looking at their psychological, and I would add spiritual well-being in alignment with their physical being. So that's the study. So these are some pictures. You will not see any pictures of me in a wheelchair, because when I was in a wheelchair, I would not let them be taken. So this picture down in the bottom left-hand corner, that is me at an ALS conference in England, and I had tea, and I am standing with the Royal Duchess. And we had tea together, and it was an amazing experience. And that's my long curly hair that I had loved and grown to love. And the picture in the middle, the large picture in the middle is, I was part of creating one of the first early response teams to Hurricane Katrina that went to Biloxi. We were there as soon as they let in early responders after the first responders. And so this is part of that team that they were doing. And the bottom one is me being in my favorite place in the world, Hawaii, and taking a helicopter ride. So, so I healed myself as a person. Whether or not I healed physically, my goal was to become the person I was created to be. And for me, physical healing followed. But even if that had not happened, I was more loving and kind than I had ever been. And for the first time in those years, I could actually say I loved me.
Yeah, and this was just what you did after. That's it. So thank you so much. Yeah. Evie, we are ready for Q&A. So I know there are lots of questions in the chat.
How expensive is it to get reversal of the 32,000? This is
there's Gabby Faye. Cool.
You know, she got a price on there. It varies so much, but if you want to answer that, Evie, you can go right ahead.
Well, I guess it depends on what you do and what you can do, because I have no idea. It wasn't that expensive for me because there was nothing that I could do. There were no treatments. There was none of what's available today. I wish there had been. And so one of the things that I think is so important is to try to learn how to listen to what your body says it needs. Because every one of us needs something different. If there was a cookbook recipe, that would be out there.
Okay, do you have one, Marcel?
Okay,
yes,
Marcel and Gabby. Go ahead, Marcel. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yep.
Kathy asks, where did you place the pads for your muscle stim? And which muscles, for how long, and how often?
Well, I wish I had a solid memory of that. I moved them around. So I put them on my weakest muscles, my thigh muscles. I put them on my arm muscles. And I think that the physiologist that I was working with then, was like a TENS unit muscle stimulator. We kept increasing the time. I don't think I ever went more than 20 minutes on a single muscle group. But you have to recognize that was about 35 years ago now.
And so, was it TENS?
Yes, it was TENS.
TENS, okay. Mm-hmm.
That was all there was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have another one here, or Gabby, do you want?
Sure. Yeah, we can sit there if you want. Hi, Evie. All right, Margaret Sullivan asks, what kind of diet do you follow? Is it organic, dairy-free, gluten-free?
So, you know, all of my life now, you have to make choices. So I don't do wheat. I don't do any gluten. I don't do any dairy for multiple reasons. I try to eat as organic as I can, but I am not fanatic about it. And I try to eat healthy. As a minister, I had a setback when I was ministering in New York. My house became toxic with mold, very toxic. And so I had toxic mold exposure, which the levels were, they said if I'd been allergic to mold, I would have died in the house, but instead it got into my body. And so it made me weaker for quite a while because it went to my neurosystem again, my weakest link. And so part of what I had to do then was detoxify from the mold. As an example, it was black mold and red mold. And I would encourage people to have their homes checked for mold because it can be a neurotoxin. The mold spores counts are supposed to be equal inside and outside your house. Outside my house was 400 moles per meter squared of the black mold and the red mold. And inside my house was 140,000 moles per meter squared. They literally had to tear, it was the parsonage, they literally had to tear it out from the inside. I lived in a hotel environment for about 6 months while they took the stairs out, the walls out, put in a System 2000 and redid the whole thing. So there are some ways. Somebody I just saw ask, can you get checked for mold in your body? Yes, but there's only some doctors that do that. There's still doctors around that don't believe mold affects you. But when you can find one, yes, there are multiple tests that they can do to see the effects of it, not mold itself, but the effects of it.
I have a question. How much of the mindset, having a minister's or ministry mindset in your healing, did that have a part of you, even later on as you had turned this disease around?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean, Scott. I don't know that I would have thought then I had a ministry mindset, but maybe I did. I mean, I never wanted to be, when I got a call to go into ministry, I actually thought God was joking. Because I thought, why would you want somebody like me to go into ministry? So, but I did have that ability to look within myself and the discipline to want to change and let go of. That's why I called it naked honesty, to be brutally honest with myself about who I resented and why and what wasn't working in my life and why was I doing things, but not in a guilt-inducing way, in a motivating way, to know that I learned that if I chose those things, I could change those things.
We have on mold, we have another question. Can you get checked for mold in your body? Also, and can you give more information on how to detox from mold?
No, I can't. That takes a medical person that can lead you through that. There are, if you go to, what's the website? Let me ask another question and I'll pull up what this exact website is.
Okay. This is from Pat Fogarty. Can you speak a bit more about meditation? You mentioned 3 sessions daily of 20 minutes. It seems to come up nearly every other week.
Sure. Okay, so I have found meditation to be really important for me. That was the question, right?
Yeah, and I think they would like to know maybe what exactly you do for meditation, if you listen to guided or do visualization, or just your process.
Okay, so it was a little bit of a potpourri. I would have some music that I found would lead me into a what I would call a deeper state of consciousness, where I went deeper inside of myself and kind of lost full interaction or sensing of around me. I was sensing deep within, and I would just be quiet. I would just kind of be in that space of not asking any questions, not doing anything, just trying to go deep within myself to allow whatever energy needed to be there, and to center myself deeply. And then I had my visualization beside that. So there was meditation, and then there was visualization. Later, kind of mid-process, I discovered from a Christian perspective, Father Thomas Keating's centering prayer. And that led me deeper into that quiet space where I could just rest in the presence of, again, my word, holy, rest in the presence of the holy. And then my visualization, like I said, was just very active. I slowly went through my whole body. First I invited this crew. Well, it just kind of happened. This crew just kind of appeared one time in my visualization. And I thought, okay, that's a great one. It came to me. And then I invited it into my body and just started working with it every day. And it grew. I can still see it in my head. the crew, the little crew that works. And for some people, it might be sound. For some people, it might not be a visualization at all.
So Evie, can I ask you, so the construction crew that you described, is that different than your meditation, or is that always a part of your meditation?
That was different than my meditation. They were two separate. I mean, I might do one right after the other, but I moved from one to the other. So
It's interesting that Evie is not the only one that did a construction crew. Another ALS reversal who was diagnosed back in the 80s, just pretended it was a guy, and he was fairly young, and he just imagined like this erector set and these little tiny, nano-sized people coming at workers just like Evie's, repairing his muscles and repairing his nerves. So I think that's fascinating that you had a very similar construction crew.
Yes.
Evie, I have a question here.
Yes.
What was one of your initial signs that you were actually turning this disease around? What were some of the, signs that initially happened?
The very first sign was that I didn't feel like a bathtub with a slow leak anymore. That was the very first sign.
So you're saying it was a feeling more than a physical?
I could feel energy leaving my body.
Feel it, okay.
And there became a day when I no longer felt energy leaving my body. But that was before any physical change had occurred. And then I would say, for me, I think one of the fortunate aspects of my disease was it came on really rapidly. It also seemed to abate at a fairly rapid pace. I mean, like over a year and a half.
Wow.
But it came on in in weeks. I went from being director of intensive care and coronary care to being in a wheelchair in 6 weeks. About.
I have a question here from Morton. Did you drink any special water?
No. I mean, filtered water, but that's all.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, here's one from Karen Filmoni. Had you lost your voice?
I was losing my voice. I hadn't lost it completely, but I was in the process of losing it. It had changed. It was weaker. It was a lot quieter.
And were you slurring words?
People said I was, so I imagined that I was. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Tabitha. Did you detox heavy metals?
Well, the only thing I did was I took the mercury fillings out. Mm-hmm. There might have been some healthcare, it would have been new age healthcare practitioners called then that would have been around that might have done that, but I would not have probably known about that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. I know we talked about this a little bit, but perhaps you can elaborate more. Pinnakin Shah says, I totally relate to the emotions affecting my physical and mental health. Can you please elaborate more about the construction crew that you visualize?
Oh. So if I close my eyes, I can go inside my body right now. Because my body still deals with the effects of all of this stuff. My body, when I got the mold toxicity, I lost some function. Some of that has been regained. So I can see them working in my spinal column, trying to take out the cells that have died and putting in new cells and putting in wiring that goes to my muscles. And in my muscles, it's kind of like bricks. They're building, the construction crew is laying bricks and building bricks. And then there are those that have little wheelbarrows full of junk that needs to be gotten rid of. So they put it into the system of my body that gets rid of toxins, and that gets rid of the things that don't need to be there. And then there are some of them that are resting, and I'll ask them what do they need in order to do their jobs. And in my mind, in my meditation, I'll hear something, and so I'll try to do what I hear. You know, it might be that they need me to rest more, or they need me to do more meditation, or they need me to do something. I know this can sound crazy, folks, but it's part of how I have my mind-body connection. It's part of how I can touch into my body, because all of our bodies want to talk to us and tell us what's going on and what needs to happen. There's nobody that knows your body better than you. No doctor can know your body as well as you can know it. Mm-hmm. And as a nurse, I saw that all the time, particularly in the ER, when somebody would come in and say, I know this pain in my abdomen isn't my endometriosis pain, if a woman. And doctors had told her, it's just your endometriosis pain. It's nothing serious. Go home. This woman had a perforated bowel by the time people believed that her body, that she was saying her body was not right. And so our body talks to us, but it'll do it differently. So my construction crew was a method by which I found to be able to listen to my body.
Mm-hmm. Evie, you being in the medical field itself, it seems that you didn't really dwell that deep into the science of your own disease, or was it that you pretty much were relying more on what you were dealing with personally? How deep did you dwell into the science of your own disease?
Well, that probably came a little bit later. But I delved deeply into the mind-body-spirit connection research that was going on then, with Larry Dawsey, with so many other people. That was where I went, was to try to understand the biochemistry of morphogenetic fields and quantum theory and all of that. That was where I went.
On a very simplified level, Evie, you said, you told us at one point that when you were angry, when you were upset, that you could actually feel physical changes in your body. And this isn't during meditation. This was just during regular life.
Right. When I started trying to learn what feelings were, and then I recognized that, I mean, I knew it wasn't like I didn't feel anything, but I knew I would be like upset with, let's just say, Meg. But I didn't understand what that was. And then I noticed that every time I was upset with Meg, I had this little tightness in my stomach. And then I noticed that tightness would be there first. And then I got to thinking about, well, is that anger? And then I recognized that it was anger, and that I could express that, and that in expressing that in healthy ways, anger was not unconsciously having a hold of me. I was finding a way to release it and let it go. We can most people are had by emotions instead of have emotions.
And is that equally true for the positive emotions like joy and love?
Yeah, gratitude. I found that, I had butterflies in my stomach. That was my first sign that something was really pleasing to me, really happy, making me feel glad. It was this lightness. It was this feeling of a weight coming off my shoulders or something like that. And I mean, I laughed and I cried. I did all that normal stuff. I just didn't express my feelings. I didn't identify them. I thought that feelings were only for weaklings.
It's interesting because Michelle says she was told that she had ALS over the phone while she was at work. Well, I got the diagnosis. I went back to my desk and I continued to work.
That makes sense. Yes. Yeah. Wow. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, really sorry to hear that.
Here is one
So
quick question for Patricia here. Has the recipe for glutathione suppositories been posted?
I think Martin posted it on the Leap group, and if you are not in the WhatsApp Leap group, definitely join that group, and instructions for joining that group are in the notes from last week. So when you go to the recordings, you go to, you log in as a member, you go over to PAL support, and you go down to webinars, and in the webinar from Tabitha's, and the notes is instructions on how to join the Leap group. So he does have that recipe, and it is posted on the Leap group. And he can repost it, but that's definitely, you definitely want to join that group.
Okay.
It's really good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Gabby, did you have another question?
I mean, there are a few more. Mm-hmm. Eileen Dittmar says, where can we get a centering prayer? Or I guess, Evie, if there's a specific one that you use.
Well, centering prayer is a technique, and there's generally centering prayer. There's generally centering prayer groups from all over the place. Father Thomas Keating wrote a book called, I think it was Healing Heart, Healing Mind. Anyway, if you look up Keating, he's got a series of books out. Keating, Dr. Father Keating, Father Thomas Keating. He's now passed away, but an incredible teacher. He was abbot at a monastery in Colorado, and realized in the 80s that he needed to take centering prayer out of the monastery to the people. And so they still hold centering prayer retreats at this monastery in Snowmass, Colorado. And if you just Google centering prayer, you'll find a lot more information about it.
There's also a question here on diagnosis. One of the things that you mentioned is life expectancy. I think you did some work I think that was in one of the articles about you that you had written ages ago, on the fact that if you told people they were going to die, they were going to die, and then they had to stop the study because they told perfectly healthy people that they had cancer, and then they started dying.
Yeah, I tried to find that, Patricia, and I couldn't find it in all my stuff, but there's been multiple studies that have talked about how we can believe what's told us, and then it eventually becomes true. And I think that is so critical because it points to that strong mind-body connection. And I think Larry Dawsey in some of his work has some examples and data on that. But I know for a fact that there are people who, well, and one kind of, this is just a different example the other way. When I had polio, I was only 18 months old, and I was on a respirator, and I was the smallest child ever in an iron lung. And there was another gal about 4 years older than me who had a very mild, and they lived in the same city that I lived in then. And I remember we went over to see them a couple of times, and I remember at one point, maybe I was 13 or 14, I asked Mom why we stopped going to see them. And she said, well, honey, it was because they had decided their daughter couldn't do anything anymore, that she'd had polio, and and I can use this word, was going to be a cripple. And my folks had decided I had polio, and I was going to do everything that I could do. My mom, and they did not want me to be. And so today, this woman has never, I mean, she never was able to do what she could have done because they didn't do physical therapy on her. They didn't do any, they just believed that her life was over. And so her life was over. my folks believed that my life had taken another turn. And I don't know how two people so young had such wisdom, but when I would ask my mom if I could do something, now you gotta and so if I went, by doing something, I meant like pump up the swings and jump out of them, ride a bicycle, roller skate, climb a tree, jump off a diving board, you name it. My mom always had one answer, and it would be, honey, I do not know if you can do it, but let's give it a try. And that said to me more than anything else. It said, I couldn't do it. I could fail. It was important that I could try it and fail, and that would be no big deal. But that she would be right there with me, and she supported me. And so that led me to being able to try so much more. And I think it's the same way with our health and with dealing with illness. We don't know what, my words would be to all of you. I don't know if you can do this, but together, let's give it a try. Let's do the best we can, because at the very least, it will make your life better.
I'm looking here to the questions. There is a question from Parvati. She asks, did you have any muscle atrophy? And
the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And where?
Arms, upper arms in particular. My right leg was already atrophied. It atrophied some more. My left leg a little bit, but it was my strongest to begin with. It was my ox that carried me through everything.
Somebody asked earlier, and I'm just going to combine with this question here from Michelle. Did anyone in your family have ALS, and do you feel that there is also a mind-spirit connection to ALS for people with familial ALS?
So one of the places I'm going to background this just a little bit. I started out, and probably where I would have ended up would have been, if I'd have followed my heart's path, would have been in genetic research. I wanted to be a geneticist and an ethicist, somebody who helped people make ethical decisions. And so in one of my classes, I've never forgotten a professor who very clearly said, everybody has a genetical propensity, but nobody has an absolute genetic destiny. And that has stuck with me my whole life. And now you can see that in studies that have been done with identical twins, where they both have the genetic propensity for, let's use Alzheimer's. For Alzheimer's or for another genetic disease, one of them gets it and one of them does not, with the same genetic propensity. So, I'm not saying it's not harder or it's not easier, but I'm saying, yes, there still is a mind-body connection. So sometimes I think we need to look more at what happens to the people who have these genetic propensities and they don't get it, or they don't get this, or they don't get that. What's going on?
That's a good point. Really good answer.
And that's true of the C9 gene. There are many, many people with the C9 gene that never get ALS. Why is that?
Yeah.
So, Evie, Chai asked, what was it, the sickness that led you to seek God and being a minister?
No. I mean, okay, that's a long story and another story, but I left the church when I was 16 because I thought the church was full of hypocrites and all this stuff. But I didn't leave a spiritual journey. I was always looking for people who wanted to live their beliefs and live in a way that was committed to making the world a better place. And so I was on that journey, and at the point that I was trying to discover more about that, I met some people who were really living their beliefs. And when I started reversing, I joined forces with them. And we were a small group of people that worked to make the world a better place. So I was doing good work. I still wasn't back in church. I believed in God. I believed in a higher power. I always have. And things started changing in my life. So I never set out like from this illness to be a minister. I set out to make the world a better place. And eventually that led me into ministry. Now I still don't know whether that's making the world a better place or not, but that's where I am at the moment. And I'm a social justice activist, so you might as well know that.
I see here a question from Robert. We want to get into the Healing ALS group. How can we do that? I'm not sure if you already answered that one.
So the Healing ALS Pro Group is just go to hopedr.org. That's Joyce's website, and she leads a short pro group every Saturday.
And
So
I'm going to type that in.
hopedr.org. I will put a link on it on healingals.org as well. But right now, just go to hopedr.org.
So I am going to put on a link to everybody to a website. If you want to know more about mold, this is one place to go. My passion, 4, health.com.
And also, Evie, if I'm a pal and I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you, could you give me a rundown of some good takeaways that I can take away from this initially? A, B, and C. What would be some good takeaways from you right now?
Well, you should probably say that, Scott. What are some good takeaways?
But I'm not a pal.
Okay.
So, you know, I want this to apply to all of my beautiful friends out there.
The number one, I don't know what the takeaways really are. You each have to define that. But for me, it would be that there is hope. Don't let a doctor define your life. Do some of the hard work that is needed to really not only address the physical needs of your body and the things that are available now to help you with that, but also look at the healing that needs to occur in the emotional, spiritual realm. Some of us may have had some very traumatic pasts, and those healings are ongoing. And there may be something that you need to let go of. That would be another thing. Is there something in your life that you're holding on to that that is weighing you down, that is taking your energy?
I was speaking to someone with ALS yesterday, and we were saying it's really difficult to stay positive as you're going, as you see you physically going downhill. One of the things I love about the 10 questions is that you can assess, instead of assessing your body, assess how are you doing with your mind, and that's what you did with your 10 questions. So you can be, the physical doesn't matter. How did I do with my mind today? How did I do with my emotions? How did I do with my soul, myself as a person today? And evaluate yourself in that way every day rather than the physical. And I found it really interesting that when you healed as a person, the physical healing just naturally followed. It wasn't even done on purpose.
No, and the thing that's really kind of striking is we all want our bodies to heal. We know that. We all want more time. We all want to be in better physical condition. We all want to have things different than they are. But I truly came to a point where I was just as accepting of life as I had been of death. And at that point, it meant that for me, either one could have happened. And I was more than at peace with living or with dying. And I lived. I can't explain it other than that.
There was one question from Aiden, who has another detailed question on the mold. Was the mold exposure a factor in the ALS, or did that happen later?
Oh no, the mold just happened 12 years ago.
Okay, that was later. Okay.
Right.
Mhm.
Joyce asked, how long after the fillings, you got your fillings removed, did you notice any improvement?
I probably could not answer that question because I wasn't tracking it. It was just one of the things that I did. So
Right.
it was probably,
But you noticed the improvement really after you had changed your mental state.
right. But it probably was part of the package, but that's all I can say.
Okay.
There's
like
another
this
question.
one.
Oh, go ahead. That's fine.
For them, Robert Campbell, you want to ask that one?
No, actually, this was a question for you, so I'll wait till you're done.
Okay. How did you personally deal with the voice of death whispering in your ear at 3 a.m.?
That's a hard one. Because initially for me, I was comfortable with that. And so it's kind of the opposite. But if the voice of death is whispering in your ear, before that happens, come up with whatever music is life-giving to you, or a prayer that is life-giving to you, or words of your own that are life-giving to you, that you just can in essence say, I'm not listening to you. And you begin to fill that space in your mind. That middle of the night space can be the hardest. With something, fill it with something that is life-giving to you.
Great. Great answer.
Well, these last few minutes here, we'd like to get in some audible questions. So Tish, if you get a chance, maybe you can unmute everybody and let some folks get in some, that way we can do a little rapid fire and everybody can get the rest of those questions in. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely. So I'm muting, I just muted everyone, and now everyone can unmute yourself and you can share anything. We're really at the end of our time. So please, everyone, feel free to ask Evie a question directly, audibly, or just share anything that's going on with you.
Hey. How did she reverse ALS?
Tony,
Hi.
could you please repeat that and say that again?
How did she reverse ALS?
How did you reverse your ALS? Tony's asking.
Tony, that was the whole thing that I was talking about. It happened as a byproduct of me doing everything else in my life. And that is a really difficult thing for a lot of people to hear. And I get that. But I still think I want to encourage you to do everything that you feel you're called to do. Do all of the treatments that are available, the drugs that are available, whatever your body says it needs. Try it and try something. Your body will tell you if it's working or not. If it's not working, then move on to the next thing. Maybe that's the only way you'll know is by trial and error.
And heal your thinking.
And heal your thinking and your spirit. I mean, you've got to work on that at the same time.
Evie, how much of a percentage for you was it physical and mental, spiritual? What would be your percentage? We keep telling people it's at least 50-50, but is it with you more 70-30?
80-20.
Wow, 80-20. Okay, that's a good point. So 80 spiritual, 20 physical. Mm-hmm. Very important. Thank you.
Evie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, did you take any supplement? Vitamins, supplements? Did you take anything?
Not a huge number, but you definitely took some vitamin supplements.
Oh yeah, I was doing kind of just vitamins because that's what there was, you know. So, and
Yeah.
Meg was giving me something. Meg was into Findhorn, Scotland. If any of you know Findhorn, Scotland, it was really kind of way out there and some new age stuff. And so she might have had an herb she was giving me. I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't have even known for sure. So.
Okay, thank you.
Adam Crane also asked, why do you think that medical professionals continue to be reckless with their ALS diagnosis in terms of giving us a death sentence?
Because they believe it.
Hey.
Because When we were doing our study, we found people who had been living with ALS for many, many years. They all weren't newly diagnosed. Some of them were, but some, and the idea and the thing was, well, have you gone back to your doctor? Well, no. Why would I go back to the doctor that told me 8 years ago I was going to be dead? So in the doctor's experience of reality, they only mainly know of people who have died. And so that continues then to reinforce that reality for them. I mean, according to Dr. Patton, I was the first, I was already in the dead file. He didn't even know I was dead, but I was already in his dead file.
Yeah, that's pretty sad, to be honest with you. Even right on up to the top doctors in the world with that same mindset. It's sad.
Well, what's interesting is Dr. Merit Kukovic at Mass General, she told us that there's no reason that people with ALS can't live a normal lifespan. If you're willing to get a tracheostomy, there's no reason that your life expectancy shouldn't be normal. And that just blew me away. I'm like, why don't neurologists tell us that?
Well, right, because if you look at it, it's the side effects of ALS that most people die from. But people make choices also. You have to believe, your life has to be of the quality that you want to continue living also. And so those are ethical choices that only each person can make themselves.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go right ahead.
I'm Rob from Roanoke. Again, I can't emphasize how much I appreciate these Sunday afternoon sessions. Just fantastic. My question is, and I might have missed this, I apologize, but you went down very quickly. It seemed like within 6 weeks you were in a wheelchair. Is that correct? How long were you in a wheelchair with that leaky tub? And then before you started to turn around, how long did you level off? What was the time frame? And then how long did it take you to come back?
Probably a year.
So a year in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Like you were going downhill. And then you were able to get up out of the wheelchair all of a sudden? You had enough strength to get out?
Over time, I mean, yeah, there was one day when I recognized, I wondered if I asked myself the question, can I stand up by myself? I hadn't done it. Can I do it? And I did. And this relates back to my personality because when I was 4 years old, I had never even stood up in physical therapy yet following polio. Now, I had a long leg brace on, I had an arm brace on, I had a back brace. I had never stood up. I'm sitting on the couch in the house, and I remember this so clearly. My mom's in the kitchen, and I yelled at her. I said, "Hey, Mom, do you care if I get up and walk across the room?" And she came to the door between the kitchen and the living room, and she said, "Honey, if you think you can do it, go right ahead." She didn't tell me no. She didn't come to help me get off the couch. I scooted myself off the couch, and I started walking across the living room. And we were in an upstairs apartment, and she went running downstairs. We were in a woman's home, Mrs. Crummas, yelling, "Mrs. Crummas, she's walking, she's walking." So there was something from very early on about me with a body connection. That's all I'm saying. So I hadn't really done anything yet, but one day I felt like I could give it a try.
That's fantastic.
And I think you said it was about 18 months to get completely back after you had leveled off.
Well, it was more than that to get it completely back, but at that point I probably wasn't in a wheelchair anymore.
So you were partially in a wheelchair for part of that 18 months of recovery.
Yeah, like in public or out doing stuff, maybe closer for another year. My wheelchair always traveled with me, and then there was one point I just gave it up.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you very much.
Go right ahead.
Did you do exercises to get your arm strength back?
Yes, I did. I did do exercises. When I stopped feeling like a leaky tub, that was when I put in more of an exercise routine.
Okay, yeah. He feels that. Bob, did you want to say anything?
Well, I'm so encouraged by your talk, and I can't use my left arm right now, but you know, I'm gonna use it. Thank you.
Okay.
He muted us. Okay.
Okay, we are kind of in the wrap-up phase right now with our time and time deadline. Does anybody have anything positive to say? Any gaining in functionality that they'd like to share with anyone here?
Just have a quick question. Did she ever have a tracheotomy?
No. They wanted to put me on a breathing machine for nighttime because my respirations were getting so wacky. And because I still thought I wanted to die, I said no to that. So that was the lowest I ever got with my breathing.
Did you have any genetic testing for ALS? Have you ever been genetically tested since then?
No. And genetic testing they weren't even thinking about it so much then. A little bit with familial ALS, but you had to have a familial history of ALS in order for them to think about it.
Tony has something he wants to say.
Go ahead. Is that Tony Blackman up there in Canada?
That's Tony Blackman in Canada and Sue.
Okay, Sue. Tony, go right ahead.
So he keeps a journal. So this is what he wrote. 5 weeks ago, I woke up in bed at 3 a.m. I started doing leg stretching and knee ups to my chin like I had no ALS. After falling back to sleep and when I awoke in the morning, my legs were stiff again. It was like a light switch turning off and on. And he can barely move his legs. So that's strange, right?
It shows what's available, what his body can still do. You get those hints.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get those moments where it's like, oh, I need to keep working because this happened.
Yeah.
And that happened with Tabitha's father, by the way. He can now move his arms somewhat. He's just starting to move his arms. It started in his sleep.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember it started with a twitching, right, of the foot or something.
Well, it wasn't even a twitching. It was very slow movement of his arms, but they took a video of it to show him because he was moving his arms in his sleep, and yet during the day he couldn't yet. So and now he is just starting to again. So it's very exciting. If he's able to move at night, that is wonderful.
Yeah, and moving legs up to his chin. I mean, if you can see him during the day, he can't do that. I mean, he goes on a stationary bike at the gym. I have to help him on, but once he's on there for 40 minutes. He's good.
Wow.
Then I come and help him off of it. But 40 minutes, he's going like a crazy person.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And hopeful.
Oh, yeah, always hopeful. Be positive.
So Eric has a trach. Yeah, this is my husband, Eric. And he hasn't been able to move his right hand for, over a year. Sometimes most of it isn't functional movement, but we're about 5 years in almost, and he still can actually move everything.
Wow.
Real small movements, but you can live a long time. I think pretty good, decent life. We traveled and he hiked, but he's on CPAP. When they told him that he couldn't breathe in the hospital, the ventilator breathed for him for the first few weeks, but after that, he's been on CPAP. So it's basically pressure support, but it helps him. It helps him be able to get the right oxygen exchange and blow up the carbon dioxide. And he just does really well, still walks with assistance.
Wow.
3, 4 people, maybe 5 people. But so, what I really liked about your story, Dr. Evelyn, is, and I was telling his girls here that, the main thing with wanted really to emphasize that you change in your mind first. You had that feeling. You felt like something's different. And that's, went through. It said the same. It just like something was different. So I think, overall, we like we like rituals. We like the vitamins. We like to know exactly on point what to do. But throughout all of these videos, the main thing, the common denominator throughout everybody's success has been, a mental, emotional commitment to make that change and to build it up in their minds and really to, embody that sense. And I hope that that's what most of the people understood from your story, like we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's really good. I understand you can't remember quite, what vitamins or what particular protocol you did. And I just hope that people understand that it's not exactly all that important. It might have helped, but really you did upstairs in your mind, in your heart.
Yeah, when we've looked at our 30 reversals that we've looked at in detail, the only commonality was a change of mindset. That was the one thing. Everyone did everything completely differently. There was no one formula except for that change of mindset.
Eric's an ER doctor, and so, he knew pretty early on and got really upset right away about what was happening, and that was back in 2016, and it took him several years, really long, hard years of kind of not accepting and fighting against it and sort of not really committing mentally to calm down. But now that he has, I think we're going to we've been doing Mark's supplements and the leap to be fit and everything, but like I said, I tell him all that it starts inside. You've got to make peace inside yourself first. I loved your list. Did I say thank you? Did I check on other people besides myself? Things like that. I think that's so important.
Thank you.
Like hearing your personality sounds so similar. To him working in the hospital. He was a really young doctor. He finished early. He was super, successful, driven, great career.
Yeah.
And it hits, with people in the medical field. They know what's going on. And, the doctors don't have any mercy with a medical professional when you get a problem. The same thing they said. We went to the hospital for the vent, and they said, well, he can't breathe. You're a doctor. You know what's going on. Get on your assisted breathing mode and get out of here. It wasn't easy. He hasn't been to the doctor since.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. We're really happy to see you looking fantastic after all this time.
So
we'll get the same way.
Absolutely, Eric. And Mark Manchester's story must be amazing to you because he had made that mental shift as well. He was living, I couldn't believe he got married how many years into his diagnosis?
Oh, that's the funny thing. Actually, we have a mutual friend with Lisa. I'd actually spoken to her several years ago, but we were so busy. We were traveling all over and we never slowed down. And so she was telling me, oh, try this supplement, try that. And I was like, Eric was still eating and drinking at the time and he wouldn't, it was hard sometimes to get him to try new things. We were traveling. We couldn't get the supplements that she had, but we actually have a mutual friend. She was working with the husband of one of his cousins. So we had known her for a while. When we saw the story, we were like, oh, hey, there they are. And yeah, Mark looks fantastic. So they struggled for a long time. And, and Eric loves watching Mark. We watch Mark all the time.
So if anybody wants to see it's old. Charlie Wiedemeyer was a man who was part of our study. He has since passed, but he lived for 20 years on a ventilator.
Wow.
And there is the Charlie Wiedemeyer story, W-I-E-D, I believe, M-E-Y-E-R, which is both a documentary that was done about his life. He had been a football coach and one of Hawaii's top high school football players, and also a movie about Charlie Wiedemeyer. And what's so amazing and what I find so inspiring and have always found inspiring is that his life was full of quality and purpose when he couldn't move anything and was on a respirator and continued to be. And he was hysterical.
Yeah.
He went around doing inspirational speeches and he couldn't speak, but he could move his lips, so somebody else was his voice. So anyway, it's just a very uplifting and inspiring movie and documentary.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this.
The movie Breathe is also wonderful. It was it took place in the 40s with someone who had an iron lung for 20 years, and he decided to stay around for his son. And the movie was made by his son, saying how grateful he was that his father had chosen to live and be a dad to him for 20 years. So that's a very inspiring story also.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Hello?
you. Is that Daphne?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Daphne,
I
you
was-
go right ahead. And this is probably going to be the last one because we do have to wrap this up.
Okay, thank you. I was diagnosed in February, and my hands are getting weaker all the time. Is there anything anybody's done that could strengthen them before they get useless? I can still use them some.
Well, I do not know, but does anybody out there have some advice for Daphne?
Just keep them flexible. Keep them flexible, because one day when you can use them again, you don't, it's going to be a lot harder to fight those contractions. I would say just keep them flexible. Like Eric hasn't been able to use them, but he can still move them.
Right, and Eileen had a good question. So one of my things is go ahead and get your own visualization meditation program. Eileen Julie McDonough shared this book, and Eileen said she just started doing PT at home. So Eileen, why don't you share that book again that Julie McDonough had suggested to you that now you have and have started using?
Yeah, I wanted to thank Julie for sharing about that book last week, because I bought the book. It's called Physical Therapy for ALS for $20, and the website is Simplessa, the same website that sells the Deanna protocol. And it has caregiver instructions in it with all the exercises. My daughter was here yesterday, and we went through it all, and it has different levels for whatever level you're at. But I would highly recommend that book. It has stretching. Every single part of your body, there's an exercise for $20. So thanks, Julie, for sharing.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to start saying my goodbyes to everybody. Yeah. Evie McDonald, I want to thank you very much. It's been a lot of years, and you are wonderful and very grateful, and a lot of pals are very grateful that you're able to share your story with us. Okay?
Wonderful to be here today, everyone. Blessing.
And I want to thank all of you who joined us. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to start bye-byes by trying to mention as many people as I can. Bye, Mary. Bye, Freddie. Bye, Jade. Bye-bye. Bye, Paul out there. Bye, Jimmy. Bye, Maria. Bye, Anita, Vera, Carlos, Samuel, Cynthia. Bye, Lorraine. There's Lorraine Kilpatrick over there. Bye-bye. Bye, Tondalea. Bye, Carlos. Bye.
Bye, Steve Lozick and Steve Arscott.
Yes, and Steve Arscott there, and Linda, and Dorothea. And oh, there you are. Hey, who's that next to you, Linda? All right. Bye-bye. Okay.
Bye, Michelle.
Bye, Gary.
Bye, Kathy.
Bye, Jane. Bye, Tony. Up there. Bye-bye. And
bye,
McFinn.
Marianne.
Nice to see
bye,
you,
Bill.
McFinn.
Nice to see you, McFinn.
All right. Bye,
there
Michelle.
Is McFinn.
Bye-bye. There you go, Bill. Bye.
See you next time.
Right.
By the way, McFinn is host to Everything ALS, which is every other Wednesday. So, McFinn, just say hi real quick, because they've been doing great work over at Everything ALS as well.
Well, McFinn, he was down to only moving 2 fingers in a wheelchair. He couldn't move at all. And now he is so functional, he out-hiked me on his own property there. I couldn't hardly keep up with him. He's fantastic. All right.
They were at it with the saws and the shovels, and I don't know what they were out there with last week. So,
yep, working all of his tools. He's doing fantastic. Well, maybe next time we'll be able to hear you over there, McFinn. I'm sad I can't hear your voice, but that's great.
Can you hear it now? No? Okay.
Oh, there you are. Yes.
Hey. Everything has a purpose. Anyway, thank you, folks. Each and every one of you are just like me.
We're all spiritual beings having a physical experience. So get into it. Life and death are the same thing. Love them, and they'll love you back. Don't resist.
So McKin was diagnosed in 2006, and was in a wheelchair down to 2 fingers of movement of one hand. And look at him now.
You got it. Life changes when you change. Okay, a pleasure, folks. See you next time.
Thank you.
All right, love you, brother. Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, Dorothea. Bye-bye, Alan. Bye-bye. We'll see you all. Bye, Shelly. Your Shelly made it. Bye-bye. Bye, Jade. Like that. Fantastic. Bye-bye. Bye, Danny. Hey, Danny made it. Fantastic.